The views and opinions of any of the guests of After Hours AM are not necessarily the views and opinions of After Hours AM, its hosts, its staff, or any of its affiliates.
Welcome to the After Hours program.
Are you ready?
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Now broadcasting live from the After Hours AM studio, Joel Sturgis and Eric Olsen.
Can't shake this terror from my head tonight. Alone and forsaken I bleed. A twisted vision, a tired mind, betrayed, a victim of shame. R.I.P. you're dead to me.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of After Hours AM. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, and as always,
Joel, I've lost you completely.
you have lost me completely. Have you really lost me completely? It's for
No,
reals.
now you're back.
And I'm back now, but so is Eric Olsen, everybody, and this is After Hours AM, and like I said already, this is your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me is Mr.
Eric Olsen.
Hey, Eric, man, how has your week been? I know it's been a bit of a trying week.
Yeah, we're back to dealing with some more of the issues with health. I hate to be redundant, and I realize anyone pretty much anywhere near my age group, kind of 40s, 50s, anywhere, is dealing with things with their parents, if they're still lucky enough to have them, and I know I am lucky enough to do so. So that's been going on. Meanwhile, my teenage daughter, they're out of school. Kids are out of school today here.
School's
today,
out for summer.
And she is having a party right now that began at 9 o'clock Eastern, so 2 minutes ago.
Wow, what kind of party is it?
It's a high school school's out party.
Really?
Who knows what it is?
Wow, cool. Those are always fun. But,
Well, yeah.
we're back. And, of course, everybody knows that the last two shows were actually pre-recorded, because we kind of said that earlier, the next two, because I had sinus surgery, and actually it went great. I got really no complaints. I healed up very, very quickly. So I'm doing much better. Thank you, everyone, for the emails. Curious how I'm doing, because I'm doing wonderfully. I didn't think I would heal this quickly. Thank the good Lord looking out for me. But as we were off the air, we kind of retooled a little bit. If anyone that is a fan on Facebook of After Hours AM knows that we put a search out for some female talent, because let's just be honest, me and Eric, we only pretty much offer the male perspective of most things, right, Eric?
Yeah, because we're male.
Well, that's right. That's right. So, a lot of people weighed in. They applied, but really we found Kirsten Klang. Now, Kirsten has been, of course, she has been a guest on After Hours AM a couple different times. And then, of course, we talked, and she is also the founder of Mystical Minnesota, which is really an accomplished paranormal research group right here in Minnesota, the great state of Minnesota. And she has graciously agreed to come aboard with these two mad guys over here and read your emails. That's right, the listener submitted emails. It's been something that people have been wanted for a long time. Hey, we want our emails read, because most of the time stories are hard for us to get to be honest with you. Everything else going on. So, like I said, Kirsten, of course, was gracious enough to say, hey, I'll come and I'll do this for you guys. So, Kirsten, welcome aboard.
Well, welcome to you too, Joel, and I'm great. I'm having such a wonderful time with reading all these emails. I am a ghost story junkie, and I'm just getting my fix. Seriously, just doing this.
Now,
yeah, it's been great.
Now, have you why don't you give some people a background and what kind of got you, again, anyone that's missed your appearances, kind of got you into the paranormal before we jump into these emails?
Well, I'm like many people who get into the paranormal, and kind of what Eric's going through very soon, is that I lost my parents.
Don't say he's going through very soon. What are you, the harbinger of death over there? Eric's going to go through that very
sorry
soon.
about that. I mean, it's always too soon, isn't it? It's always too soon.
It is. I lost mine.
I lost mine 2 years apart. So,
yeah.
And I kind of went through a little, I don't know, a seeking of one spirituality.
Yeah.
So I met somebody online, and we went out to a graveyard, and I couldn't believe what I came back with. And it's all been going since there.
Wow.
And it's been wonderful.
Now, you got a website,
and,
right?
Just got the website up.
Okay,
Yep.
I was just about to say that. You got a website, of course, and that is what, mysticalminnesota.com, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then, of course,
Minnesota.com.
you have the email, and what is that one?
That is Kirsten at mysticalminnesota.com.
Cool, so anyone that wants to get their emails read can also go and contact you as well. And of course,
Absolutely.
afterhoursam.com or afterhoursam@gmail.com, excuse me. But why don't you go ahead and jump us right into this first email that was sent to you, because I know it's a humdinger. We talked about it, and it actually got under my skin just a little bit because I pre-read it, and it was a little on the scary side.
Well, this one is entitled The Doll.
Oh,
and it
no.
is about a doll. It's written by one of our favorite listeners, Andrea Messich, who's from Michigan. She is an After Hours, for many years now, listener. And she is also the author of Ghost in the Cold Room, which is available at bookstores everywhere. And, I'm just going to go ahead and read this, and we'll see what you guys think.
Crack it open. We're all
it
yours.
It scared me.
We're all yours.
All right.
My breath is baited.
All right, guys. I'm gonna get to reading now.
All right, you do that. Don't worry about us. We'll just kind of make fun of you every now and again. Don't worry. That's just what we do. But go ahead, read.
The Doll by Andrea Messich. I was searching the web one night, trying to find information on the value of an old teddy bear, when I found a website dedicated to haunted objects. I noticed that they were haunted objects of all kinds, but mostly dolls. There was one doll in particular I really liked. It was a porcelain doll with blue eyes and long brown hair, pretty pink dress, my favorite color, and a white bonnet. The story attached to her was sad. She was a spirit of a little girl that was attached to this doll who had died with her mother in a fire that was set by her father. The website runners didn't know much detail beyond that, just what a psychic had said. I didn't ask any questions. I just said, I'll take the doll, paid the $30 adoption fee.
Adoption fee for a ghost. I'm going to adopt you, my raise use my own. Sorry.
I didn't really believe it had any attachment, to be honest. You see those tags being used all the time on eBay. Haunted doll, haunted ring. It just looked like all that crapola covered in rainbows. So I didn't think there was any harm. If nothing else, it was a cool story. I had forgotten about the doll. I forgot I even ordered it because it'd been over a month since I hadn't seen it. I had been staying at my family property for over a week studying for a big test when my mom picked me up and we ran some errands downtown. I needed to stop at the post office to pick up my mail. When I got to the post office, I found that I had a package waiting. It was from the woman I had contacted about the doll.
Dun. Oh, yeah.
I took it aside and opened it to make sure it had been unbroken. There was a note apologizing for the delay, stating the little girl didn't want to be mailed out. I had to explain to her that it was all right and you'd take care of her. It was kind of weird because it was the exact doll on the website, but I had a different feeling about it. The eyes were just fake glass eyes, but they looked like they were looking right at you. I passed it off. Got back into my mom's car. She took one look at the doll and immediately hated it. Seeing my mom have such a strong reaction was weird because she's where I get my skepticism from. I at least believe in the possibility. I've been dabbling in paranormal since my dad's passing. She kept telling me, I want you to get rid of that doll. You keep that doll at your place. Don't bring it near my house. She even pulled over and tried convincing me to leave it on the side of the road. I asked her what her issue was, She would only tell me the doll was creepy. It's a pretty doll, not one of those creepy old tiny dolls. I told her, Mom, it's not really haunted. Even if it were, it's supposedly a little girl who died at the hands of her father. How sad is that? Maybe if we can prove she's haunting this doll, I can help her cross over. No child should be stuck here when they could be in heaven. My mom responded, all children go to heaven. God would never let them be stuck here.
All of them go to heaven, you hear me? All of them.
Well,
And dogs.
And dogs, too. And apes. Don't worry about the apes. They do, too.
I didn't believe it was haunted. I brought the doll to the house, and I placed it on a chair in the corner of my living room. Completely unassuming. It seemed like a regular doll. Went about my day, didn't even give it a second thought. Around 10 p.m., I went upstairs to go to bed, leaving the doll where I had left her all day. I had 2 dogs. They both hated the doll. Normally, if I leave something like that in their reach, they'd run, grab it, and race around. Lost many dolls and stuffed animals that way. They didn't even go near the chair where I put her. My dog Yoshi cowered from it. My other dog Dojo didn't want anything to do with it either. He sat on the far opposite end of the room as far as he could, just staring in the direction of that doll. The dogs followed me to bed. They went as far around that chair as they could and stayed close to my heel. I fell asleep reading a magazine around 11 p.m. 3 a.m. that first night. I heard the first noise downstairs.
No, was it kind of like this?
Wake out of a deep sleep.
Oh, that was...
My dogs, asleep in bed with me, started whining. It sounded almost like the furnace knocking loudly. I ran downstairs thinking I needed to check the furnace. When I got to the kitchen, where the basement steps were, I noticed all the cabinet doors were open. All the drawers in the kitchen were open. Every single one.
Wow, that'd be
I closed
freaky.
them all. I wasn't sure what to make of it. Was it windy? Even if it was winter, so the windows weren't open. Doors were all locked. I couldn't find anything else displaced till I walked into the living room, saw the doll on the floor, not on the chair where I left her. I have to admit, I was kind of freaking out.
I would
But
get
it's
rid of the
freaking
doll. I'm just saying. I don't mean to interject here, but that doll be gone. I'm just saying. Okay, continue. Sorry.
Patience, Joel. I didn't want to call anyone, bothering them about something I couldn't even explain. What was I going to do? Call the cops, say my cabinets and drawers are opened but nothing taken? Oh, and my doll moved? I made a point of putting the doll in a cedar chest in the basement. It wasn't until I knew it was in the box in the basement and I was all the way upstairs in my room that I could finally fall back asleep. Next day, my mom and I ran errands. I was really cranky and snapped at her over stupid things, like having it too cold in the car. It was freezing that day, 55 degrees, which isn't cold. And I had the temperature up to 70 in the car. Mom kept turning it down, which was aggravating me more than it should have. I couldn't feel warmer no matter what I wore or how high I had the heat on. Even in the house, I was cold all day. I had the furnace up to 72. I was worried the furnace wasn't working properly. My brother and his family were in town visiting. He came over to check my furnace. I couldn't even believe how cold it was, despite the heat being on so high. Felt the registers, they were hot. Said he was going to go check the furnace in the basement. He said it looked okay, but then he said, weird, there's knocking sound coming from your cedar chest. I opened it while I was looking in it to see if I could find what was going off. It slammed shut almost on my fingers. It slammed hard. I opened it. Nothing is wrong with the hinges. What the heck? Told my brother about everything that happened that night. He kind of passed it off.
Wow. Poor
That
guy.
night I went up to bed. The dog jumped in bed with me. They wouldn't calm down. Figured it was because it was so cold. I put sweaters on them. Figured that maybe my brother missed something with the furnace. So I was going to call the furnace guy the next morning. I did a little studying and fell asleep pretty quickly. 3 a.m., just like the night before, there was a loud noise. This time it was louder than anything I'd heard before. It scared me. It sounded like someone was in the house. I left my cell phone by the TV downstairs. Had only a cell, no landline, so if someone was in the house, I need the phone to call. I studied Taekwondo years ago.
Oh no,
Still have the
Karate
bow
Kid.
staff I used. A long, heavy piece of wood that would hurt like heck if you whack somebody with it. So I brought it downstairs to see what was going on. Once again, all the cabinets and drawers were open. The doors were still locked. Windows shut tight. No way anyone could have gotten in through the basement. Windows were too small for a child to crawl through. Speaking of the basement, The door was wide open.
No.
I closed it myself.
Oh, no.
That's when I heard banging in the basement. I walked up to the door and had this terrible feeling of dread. Couldn't bring myself to go downstairs. I shut the door, ran up to my room, find my dogs hiding under the bed. It was then I knew I screwed up big time. 2 days, problems. I decided I need to look into it more.
I would say that'd be a good thing.
Go ahead.
I'd say that'd be a good thing. You might want to look into that a little bit more. You know. Yeah, like maybe run away.
Just a tad, right? Next morning, my brother left his kids with my mom, and his wife came over to help me with the doll thing. My brother got the doll from the basement, placed it on the floor of the living room. My sister-in-law brought some toys, and I brought some digital recorders. We tried to coax the spirit attached to the doll to interact with one of the toys. We didn't get anything big to happen. Then my sister-in-law took a ball out of her purse, placed it by the doll. She stomped all around it, blew on it, tried everything to move it, short of pushing herself. We coaxed the spirit to push the ball to one of us. We sat in a row, about 5 feet from the doll. I was on one end, my brother in the middle, my sister-in-law on the other side. The ball rolled to me. We switched positions, asked the ball to do it again, roll to one of us. Once again, even though I was now on the opposite side where I sat before, the ball rolled right to me.
Oh, creepy.
We took recorders, hooked them up to a computer right after that happened. We captured the sound of a little girl giggling as if she was having fun playing with the ball. All seemed to match the story I was given with the little doll. Little girl's voice, wanting attention like kids do, making noise, getting into things, my cabinets, playing with a toy, banging downstairs. It's probably a spirit trying to get the doll I'd shut away in the chest. That night before bed, I set up recorders everywhere. One by the doll where I left her on the floor, one in the kitchen, the cabinet, always open at night. I went to bed. As usual, I woke up with my dogs barking, this time with their ears back. They're not noisy dogs. I looked at the clock. 3 a.m. Third night in a row. Once I realized that, I was suddenly swept with nausea and started to feel very ill. Went downstairs. Sure enough, all the cabinets were open. The drawers were open. As I was closing the drawers, trying not to throw up, I heard this ungodly moan, the male voice, in the house. The dogs stopped barking, so I ran upstairs, scared something happened. They were okay, hiding under the bed again. I listened to the recording and caught it on tape. Called my brother, and he picked up. I was actually panicked, so he came over, and I played him the audio. That's all it took. We took the doll, drove to the woods, drove as far as we could, far off the road. Dug a hole, put the doll in it, sprinkled it with holy water, buried it.
Huh.
After that, things seemed normal. Went without activity. House felt warm. Mom didn't feel creeped out. Then, a while later, Mom called to see if I had a deadbolt key for the house because it was locked. I never locked the deadbolt because it was rusty and it was very hard to unlock, so I never used it. I told her I never lock it. She tried again, and it opened without issue. She assumed the door was warped. Then it happened again. I left the cabinets open. It left the cabinets open. It freaked me out because I knew the cabinets were closed the last time I was there. 2 weeks later, still at my mom's house. Neither of us had gone back to check on the house in that time. I got a call from the city saying something was wrong. My water bill was nearly $3,000.
What? I'd be mad.
out.
Rent time.
Right? My mom and I ran to the house thinking a pipe burst. We thought the basement had to be flooded. Walked in. It was worse than we thought. It was raining in the house, literally raining. The walls were bubbling from water. Ceiling in the dining room, it caved in, and the plaster was all over the floor, carpet soaking wet. I didn't panic until the insurance adjuster came in. He said an on-off valve on the toilet had popped. He said it was odd because it wasn't rusted or broken. It looked like it had been removed. He said it probably froze because it was so cold a few nights earlier, even though the furnace was on and the pipe should have been warm enough. It wasn't even freezing outside. Cabinets started opening again. Deadlock lock was being bolted and unbolted. Now this. It was happening again. And whatever it was, wasn't happy that I was ignoring it. Getting rid of the doll did nothing. Spirit stayed with the house, not the doll. When I put 2 and 2 together, poltergeist activity Things happening at 3 a.m., feeling cold, feeling sick. Wasn't the haunting of a child, the haunting of a malicious entity I'd let in the house. Even saying that makes me sick. I let it in. I was stupid, and I let it in. That day, I emailed the website where the doll came from.
And
I
it no
emailed
longer
back
exists.
right away and asked how things are going. I wanted the truth. So I didn't tell her what had happened to me in case she'd be scared off thinking I was accusing her of something. I said, wow, I can't believe the doll is really haunted. But I have a question. Do you have time to talk? Said she's pretty busy, but if I wanted to email the question, she'd get back to me. Asked the questions just like I should have asked before. It's a really easy question. Do you know how old the doll is? She responded back right away. Oh, the doll isn't that old. But the psychic told her the spirit was from the early 1900s. So I emailed it back again and asked if the father was ever brought to justice in the alleged arson. If she ever researched if the arson took place. She emailed back immediately saying she didn't know. She wasn't sure where the girl was actually from. She didn't research that claim. She only did tell me what the psychic said. So I emailed her again and asked important questions. How did the doll come to be haunted? How do you know it's really a little girl and not a malicious entity? Do you do anything to ensure you don't send something with an inhuman spirit attached to those who contact you?
What's the return policy like?
Communication stopped. She wouldn't return my email. She wouldn't answer my calls. Finally, I found that she blocked me on Facebook. Last time I tried calling, the number was disconnected. Website comes up with 404 not found.
Wow.
I started to wonder, was this person afraid of getting blamed for events by selling these allegedly haunted artifacts, or did this person know there were dark attachments and was selling them? Maybe they're the ones who put them there. I can't say for sure, but I know I had a nightmare involving that doll. The doll was sitting in a chair where I first put her when I brought her home. There were people sitting at a dining room table with a Ouija board, holding a seance, trying to call a spirit, inviting it to possess the doll. Renovation of the house was taking place after the water incident. Since my brothers live out of town, I was taking pictures of the renovations. My oldest brother was always worried if we were having construction guys to make sure that they were doing things right because the insurance was paying them. I took pictures to prove everything was going smoothly. One of the pictures, there was an odd-shaped figure. It looked like the negative of a picture. It looked like an animalistic face with human eyes. And in the upper left-hand corner, if you look closely, there's another set of eyes that made my sister's skin crawl.
That's creepy as hell.
She and my
I'm
brother
just saying.
immediately decided it's time to come back. They researched demonic infestation, found things that made them shudder. We had all those things. 3 a.m., set of threes, odd apparition of the photo that looked off, things moving, doors locking when not locked, reopening without being unlocked, poltergeist activity, a doll moving from one place to another, a valve that looked fine in every way, mysteriously falling off for no reason, so much water. And of course the cold. It was always cold in that house. My brother and sister-in-law made it back. We decided to walk around the house and see if we could get proof of things that were going on. Put small crosses in various parts of the house that I had purchased. On windowsills, doorways, entrance. I was bringing up the one up the stairs to the bedrooms when I felt a hand grab my ankle. First, I thought it was my brother playing a joke. Then I looked back, there was no one standing there. Suddenly there was a hard yank. I fell on my stomach. Thankfully, I didn't fall down the stairs. My sister-in-law helped me back up. My brother said a prayer of protection in Latin, and he felt a hot mark on his arm. Lifting his sleeve, he saw 3 defined scratch marks appearing on his skin. They weren't deep. They
Now
were
3, we all know what that means.
Yep. My sister-in-law thought maybe he had rubbed up against the fiberglass insulation on the exposed wall. Then she walked up to find what had happened, and she found one of the crosses I had placed on the windowsill on the ground. It was leaning against the wall upside down. That's when she said she heard 3 knocks on the wall. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. There was a foul odor. She described as a nasty fart after too much spicy food.
Well, how does she get rid of this thing? I mean, come on. I mean, seriously. We get it. It stinks. But what did you do? I mean, you know.
It was becoming more brave, and it was like, you figured me out. The jig is up. I can do what I want. My brother and his wife had more experiences when they were in the same room. Phantom odors, sounds. The doors would lock and wouldn't unlock on their own. Crosses kept moving. Cabinets closed. I knew something needed to be done, but I was worried about approaching a priest about the issue. The one thing I knew that I needed to do to protect myself, demons needed invitations. I invited it into the house on accident, began infestation. That didn't get to me, demon's ultimate goal, because I had learned how to protect myself in my mom's home. A few years had passed and activity is still going on. Whenever my brother and I went to the house, we'd have...
Time to move.
Sorry. I lost something here. We'd have something gone.
It is a bit...
something here.
Yeah, it is a bit of a wordy email.
Missing. Anyway, she decided to become a full-time investigator. I didn't want other people to make the same mistakes I did. I wanted to help them before they got to the point I got to. I even wrote a book on the paranormal. I was never able to deal with my issue, and the issues continued. I turned to the house. There was some kind of assault or scratch or something being moved. It got to the point I didn't want to even go there. Mom sold her house. She'd been trying for ages. Finally went through. Full price in cash.
Huh.
Looked at houses and condos in Wisconsin, everywhere. Absolutely nothing we were happy with. So was the one thing I was dreading. Mom said we'd have to move back in the house until we found some place to go.
No, not the ever dreaded demon house.
No. That's when I finally went to my parish priest. I was ready for a fight about the paranormal, but it turned out he was the assistant exorcist in our diocese and already understood exactly what I was telling him. I showed him the photo, I told him about the occurrences. I absolutely could not move in unless whatever was there was kicked out. He agreed to help and clean the house of any malicious entities. I was waiting for him. He brought the recorder hoping to capture anything I could prove myself and whatever was there of leaving. When the priest got there, I immediately felt the change in the mood of the room. It was almost like the atmosphere had emotions, like the room got angry when the priest walked in.
No.
We started at the top of the stairs, moved down. The goal is to cast out the spirit on each floor in the name of God, trap it in the lowest floor of the building, the basement, until it has nowhere else to hide, and then it's cast out. The priest began doing the blessing using holy water, called in the name of Jesus. Started feeling very sick. Kept looking at the bathroom, thinking what would happen if I vomited. We had turned off the water in the house.
Yeah, that would be good.
While we were, all the while I kept thinking and praying, could I throw up in the bathtub? Could I turn the water on? Could I make it down the stairs and go up the door and throw up? It was just so heavy I was having a hard time breathing. Felt lightheaded, like I was going to pass out. I didn't know what to do. I realized it may be attacking me to keep me from helping with prayers, so I forced myself to focus through it. Once Father had blessed the room, I felt relief. Things felt lighter, like a sickness was lifting off a little. We went down the main floor and it all started over again. Then I came to the basement. I couldn't go down anymore. I couldn't stand that feeling that kept sweeping over me. I prayed from upstairs. I knew it was safe. I'd already been blessed. Any spirit there was forced down. I was embarrassed because the basement was still wet after water issues. And the priest had said something about demonic entities using water as a conduit. I couldn't remember all of what he said about that. If I can get him to agree, I should have him speak further about it. But then it was done. The house felt light, felt like a completely different home, felt like warm for the first time in a long time. A nice warm.
It felt warm before, though. I'm sorry.
The priest had left blessed medals of St. Benedict around the entryways to protect the house and keep evil from re-entering. We prayed on the Divine Mercy Chaplet, like a rosary dedicated to God's mercy, and that was that. We were free.
Wow.
Listened to the audio recorder. I'd kept on. The priest came. There was a threatening voice giving him a challenge. When he started his prayers, there was hateful-sounding laugh. When the blessings began, the same voice accused me. You make him torture us. There was sound of pain, then there was nothing. My mother and I moved into the house a month later. I felt panic on occasion, worry about what is going to happen when we were there. My dog Dojo would stare into the dining room and not move, just stare, no matter how long I called him. It would cause me to worry. But nothing happened. Found a new home. A month after moving in, we moved out again. House is now empty. I don't stay there anymore for any reason. There's never been another incident. God willing, nothing like this will ever happen again. I know better, and I hope through this story others will too.
My Lord.
Don't mess with what you don't understand.
Well, I would say that would be, wouldn't you say, Eric, that's a heck of a story?
Oh, it's an amazing story. It's a frightening, horrifying story.
Yeah.
My gosh, you bring the demon in and it runs around for a little while, and then next thing you know, you try to bury it, it gets mad. Bring the priest in a nutshell. He has to do all sorts of stuff. Then you feel like you're getting pukey. You have nowhere to puke because there's no water. It's a horrible story. It's a good story, but it's a horrible experience, is what I'm saying. I guess that what we take away from here is a bit of a cautionary tale. Be careful what you buy.
Yes. Don't go buying haunted dolls, whether you're adopting them or not.
No, I'm surprised there's an adoption fee.
You're gonna get.
I like the adoption fee. There's an adoption fee attached, and
yeah, they actually do adopt them out. They
wow,
consider it an adoption.
Wow. Well, we got to run to break, everybody, so we can get some money to adopt our own ghost, I guess. We come back. We got your America's Most Haunted headlines. Of course, we'll wrap this up really quick because I like to get Eric's thoughts on haunted objects. We come back.
Hi, Tom Bodette. If you can hear me, then you have an internet connection, which means you can do cool things online, like listen to streaming radio, obviously, or watch a video of a monkey washing a cat. Let your freak flag fly. Or you can book a room at a great price at Motel6.com. Isn't the internet wonderful? Everything you want right at your fingertips, and whoa, did not need to see that. I'm Tom Bodette for Motel 6, and we'll leave the light on for you.
Hey everybody, this is Joel Sturgis, and did you know that After Hours AM and America's Most Haunted have a great new website out there? You're going to want to visit America's-most-haunted.com. There you can get all the new content from all the writers for America's Most Haunted, as well as the great haunted headlines everybody loves each and every week, as well as catch After Hours AM live right there, along with podcasts, past shows, and get to know your hosts, as well as contact us all in one stop. You're going to love it. You're not going to want to go anywhere else. So come to America's-most-haunted.com today.
I'm a mom, and just like millions of other women, that's why I own guns. We're responsible, we're law-abiding, and we're everything that makes America strong. Every day we're willing to use a firearm to defend our families. But the media will never tell those stories. If a mom puts a gun to the face of a home-invading thug and makes him run for his life, the story gets buried. But if she's unarmed and murdered, the cameras will be at the scene before the police. It's time for moms like me to speak out. We are the majority. We demand the freedom to defend our families. And we challenge the media to tell the truth about our rights. I'm the National Rifle Association of America, and I'm freedom's safest place.
Are you hungry? Hungry as a gremlin? Here's gremlin cereal.
Gremlins, gremlins, bite after bite. What a tasty way to satisfy a gremlin appetite.
Gremlins is a deliciously sweet, crunchy cereal that satisfies the hungry little gremlin that's in all of us.
Gremlins, gremlins, bite after bite. What a tasty way to satisfy a gremlin appetite.
Gremlin cereal is part of this complete breakfast.
Gremlin, yum yum.
After the show, make sure you stop and join the After Hours AM, America's Most Haunted Facebook group. It is the fastest growing radio group on Facebook.
You were dead! I saw you die! I was faking. I used ninja focus to slow my heart rate down. What are you doing? I'm burying you. I'm alive! I'm alive! You're waking the neighbors! No. Shut up! No! Now I'm gonna play your drum set.
And welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, as always, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me is Mr. Eric Olsen.
Eric Olsen.
That's right. There you are, Eric. What do you think about haunted objects, Eric?
Well, I would like to think there's nothing to them, but it does not seem to be the case. I mean, we've all heard enough stories, including that amazing one read by Kirsten, and read very well. It was a lengthy tale, and boy, she embodied it. I was certainly caught up in it. So, I mean, there's so many stories about such things, and we have some, relatively well-known, reputable individuals who've been involved in these things. Obviously, we have Zaffis, and we have the Warrens, and we have the Dybbuk box. I mean, there's a number of cases where it seems pretty clear that some sort of entity, in this case apparently demonic or at least very negative, become attached. And I guess it makes sense. I mean, if we're defining spirit activity, human or otherwise, in terms of energy, then that energy could probably become attached to most anything, I would guess.
Now, would you buy it? Would you adopt the doll, Eric? Would you?
No, of course
me
not.
neither.
That would be madness.
Wouldn't that be madness? I mean, come on. How about you, Kirsten? Would you willingly go and adopt a doll like that?
Would I have a haunted doll?
Yeah, would you go adopt one? Would you go to the website and go, here's my money, give me the doll?
I probably would, though. I would try.
Are you on crack?
I'm crazy, just a little, but in a good way usually.
I would not own a haunted doll, and I wouldn't. And I love the story, Andrea. Don't get me wrong. We enjoyed it, and keep them coming, of course. And everybody else that wants to have their story heard right here on After Hours AM can go ahead and email those to afterhoursam@gmail.com or Kirsten at mysticalminnesota.com, and we'll get those on, just like we got Andrea's great story on. But kind of moving along here, we got to get to the headlines, man. We got to get to the headlines because there's a lot of good stuff going on. But,
there's every manner of nonsense going on.
Oh, my gosh. Now, I want to start off by kind of maybe just bending your ear for both of you, because I know you're both very political minded. On maybe different spectrums of politics. But what do you guys think of the Donald Trump riot?
I think it's shameful that kind of behavior is going on for anyone campaigning. I do.
What do you think, Eric, man?
I just
my concern is, while I've certainly noticed a certain toning down of the heat of the rhetoric from the Trump side, which I think is good. I think it's important. It demonstrates a certain amount of judgment. I still think there's so much vitriol attached to his campaign, and that people get very, very worked up, and it does create an environment where violence is possible. Now, the other side of the coin is we've seen some very bad behavior from Bernie Sanders supporters as well. So
yeah, I was going to say it seems to be spreading. If I'm not mistaken, guys. I mean, you guys also watch the same things I do. But Eric, I mean, you've been around. I don't want to call you old, of course, but you've been around. You're the senior member of the broadcast staff, so you've seen a few things. Have you ever seen a campaign season this heated?
Well, I mean, I was 10 in 1968. I do have memories of hearing about the riots and seeing stuff going on in Chicago on TV and Richard Daley and all the madness there. So, I mean, it's not as though it's unprecedented, but remember, as a result of that, as a result of 68, they changed party rules severely. And that's basically really when this whole primary system formally came into play, because they wanted a system that was fair and that reflected the will of the people, or at least the will of the people in the party. in terms of picking the candidate. They didn't want it to be just a bunch of insiders, because if you recall in '68, Humphrey wasn't even actively running.
No,
and he was deemed the nominee.
Yeah, they
And
just
that's
kind of
what-
grabbed him off the street, kind of. I mean, not right off the street, but I mean, they just kind of grabbed him and said, "You're going to be the nominee."
More or less. It's probably slightly more complex than that. And
Here, that guy will
was-
work.
He was certainly an active, politician, and he was involved and whatnot. He was a party bigwig as well, certainly from Minnesota, by the way.
Yeah,
as you guys
absolutely
know. Sure.
is.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, the bottom line is the whole system that's been in place since '68 or since '72, I guess, is there to make the whole system more transparent, to make it more fair, to have people's votes, to have their will reflected in the party nominee. So I think we're seeing some pushback on that, because there is a sense out there that the system is still rather rigged, and it is rigged against Trump, which is kind of nonsense, since as of today, he is the official party nominee. He has enough votes as of today. So clearly it was not rigged against him to the extent that he lost. Bernie, yes, he's trailing, but, Hillary has a lot more votes, too, when you look at the big picture in terms of the primaries. So I think the bottom line is we do have a system that is more or less fair. There are still elements kind of on the fringe that favor those who are in with the party. But, I mean, kind of what do you expect? The party is picking its nominee. So I would think you would expect that some of those higher up the party would have a little more say than none, for example. So, I mean, that's my view on it. I think part of what we're seeing is it's a combination of the system itself, people paying attention to the system, maybe people who haven't paid attention to the way it works before, people who didn't know before that there are advantages to being, the party bigwigs or being politicians, being government position holders. Those come with some advantages, and those advantages, I think, are reflected somewhat in the system. I don't think it's a terrible system. It's just, it's weighted a little bit in favor of the party faves. So that's where we are. I think what is encouraging beyond that, what is allowing, what is fostering this environment is some of the rhetoric. And we know what we've heard, from Trump from time to time. Again, I think he is making a concerted effort to tone it down a bit, and that is to his credit. And, Bernie, I don't think he himself necessarily has fostered any of this, but I think the fact that he is perceived as an outsider, the fact that people who like him really, really like him.
they're like rabid.
My wife, for example.
Yeah.
Anyone
he's
who's
every man's candidate. That's what he's been trying to present that to every voter.
Sure. I mean,
but the thing is, I think it's all about name recognition anyway.
Yeah.
I've been thinking this for a few years, that it really has nothing to do with who's the most qualified or who people like the best. It's who people see on that page when they go up there and who they recognize. It has nothing to do with anything else.
Yeah,
but we'll see if I'm proved right.
Well,
I guess I wouldn't even know who would recognize Hillary more than Trump. They're pretty well matched.
Yeah, and
they are two names that have been around for decades, have been very prominent, very much in the public eye. Hillary's been running for president since at least Bill was in office. Certainly, she was a key part of his administration. She was really Ellen Rose got very much involved.
Really likes Bernie. I just don't think he would have won against Trump because of the name recognition. Nobody, a lot of people don't follow politics, but they vote.
That and the socialism.
Yeah, yes, the socialism as well. I didn't mean to take a hard left turn into politics, but with the whole riot that we watched unfold, of course, in Albuquerque, I just wanted to get both of yours input because, my gosh, I'd never seen anything like it at a political rally before, personally. And so it was kind of shocking, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to fire up the news.
Yes, let's go on. Let's get into America's Most Haunted Headlines.
We're down to 15 minutes here. All right, to follow along, my friends, go to @AM Haunted. That's the America's Most Haunted Twitter feed. Be sure to follow us and like any tweets you like, retweet them. You don't even have to be a Twitter member, though, to follow along. Just go check it out. And it's great to be able to see the pictures. So at AM Haunted on Twitter. New discovery. Besides straight paranormal stuff, we talk about a lot of really cool, weird, cutting-edge science and cosmology and astronomy stuff. New theory just came out. Really fascinating if you think about it. Could dark matter, which is this matter that we cannot observe, we're thinking it may be as much as 3/4 of the total matter in the universe is in fact dark matter. And the fact is, it may be that dark matter is actually made out of black holes. Think about that.
That would be discovery and a half. That really would be.
It would make sense because black holes do not emit light. They're so powerful. They keep all energy, keep everything inside of them, including light. And that would certainly fit the definition of dark matter. So check that out. It's a link to one of our favorite astronomy sites, earthsky.org.
And
pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, but the picture looks like a pig nose. But anyhow, moving on.
I have heard that from more than one person. All right, now that we're moving into the holiday season, of course, people are thinking about travel, and what better place to go than National Geographic, which is the venerable site. It's venerable publications, always such a history of great images and photos. Great story there. The east of Ireland is absolutely chock full of historical haunted castles, ancient monuments, monasteries, amazing, amazing sites that go back thousands of years. And check out those images.
Wow, they're beautiful. I like the cemetery one the best, though. I do believe that is a cemetery on the left-hand side. That is so cool looking.
It's a monument.
I'm going to start printing these things up and framing these pictures. They're really beautiful.
Again, if you'd like to see the images, please follow along at AM Haunted on Twitter. Check us out. All right, so Wayward Pines came back last night for season 2, and very interesting that it's almost started over again. Yes, it's in the same setting, but it's essentially a new cast. It's a very different environment than what we saw last summer, which is supposedly in the time of the show 3 years previous. And so the big story here is it was really a surprisingly good show. Exec produced by M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong, of course. Yeah. And he is back. But if you didn't see it, don't be scared away. If you didn't watch it last summer, it's essentially like starting over.
Yeah, they're standalone. They're standalone shows, aren't they? Yeah, like you're saying. They're kind of their own entity.
The season is.
Yeah, the season is. And so it's kind of its own entity, and they probably, they kind of touch on the other season, I'm sure. But,
sure.
But quite honestly, it's its own story, so check that
Starting
out.
all over again, and mostly new cast and whatnot. Really interesting story. I was caught off guard. At first I thought, this is kind of standard, fantasy sci-fi stuff. But no, it's not. It's a really interesting, different, and frankly, pretty frightening type setting involving time travel. It involves the planet Earth in the distant future, which we didn't even find out till deep into last summer. But, of course, we now know that. It's deep in the future, and we've had the evolution, the mutation, basically, of the human species. They're a danger. So the only remaining humans that are recognizable as such, that we know of anyway, are in this one town, the only town left on Earth. Amazing. All right, let's move on. A little bit of archaeology, the Neanderthals. Now, think about this. They disappeared, they don't know exactly when, somewhere between 30, 40, 50,000 years ago. I'm not sure when the last holdouts went away. It would appear they were impacted negatively by modern humans. What a shock.
We kind of kill everything that comes in front of us anyway, so why not them?
Hey, you're not us, we're killing you.
That's right.
Although they did interbreed, we know about that now. There was some interbreeding going down.
They got a little jiggy with it, didn't they?
They did.
What kind of music they play in the background?
Apparently, mostly, not exclusively, mostly to our advantage. Some of our advantages we picked up in our genome appear to have come from the Neanderthals. There may be some negative things too, like, for example, it appears they're thinking now that maybe most allergies came from Neanderthals.
Oh, gee, great.
What?
Yeah, so I'm so happy about that,
Yeah, so am I, great.
Big
Anyway.
bone and the allergies, really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you for
exactly.
the allergies, jerks. Thank
And
you.
the heavy brow, the Neanderthal brow. All right, but they found a really fascinating cave structure. It's 176,000 years, so way back, and the Neanderthals were full steam. They were around a long, long time before apparently we impacted them negatively. I mean, it was probably a variety of factors, but nonetheless, so they built this amazing structure within a cave, but no one knows what it was for.
Well, enlighten us. I mean, no one still knows, really? I thought you say, and here's the reason I dug it up. But wow.
They don't know. They don't know if it's symbolic. They don't know if it is some
allergy related. They just don't know.
Artwork, if it's allergy related, if it is more utilitarian. They're not sure what this structure is, but it's very elaborate and quite large, and it was built by Neanderthals. They keep finding new things that the Neanderthals were able to do that we had no idea that they did. Apparently, they were loving parents. I mean, they were very, very similar to modern humans.
Just with heavy brows and,
heavy brows and heavier bodies and more heavily muscled, and they ate a lot of meat.
That's the rumor I heard. They're big meat eaters.
Something like 80% of their diet.
Wow, that's a lot of meat. That sounds like me.
It's a lot of meat. And that could have also been involved with why they went away, because at the time, if meat became scarce, that would have impacted them more greatly than the modern humans, who had a much more varied diet.
Sure.
All right, really cool on Listverse, which does, lots of lists, hence the name. Really cool listing of a number of sacred ancient sites. So we're talking thousands of years, anywhere from many hundreds to several thousands years back in time, these various ancient sites. They seem to all be sacred, and there is speculation that some might possibly be connected somehow one way or another, or were at some time, to wormholes, stargates, or portals.
Interesting. See, I remember the movie Stargate and remember the show too. Wouldn't that be cool to have a Stargate?
It would be the coolest.
Wouldn't that be awesome? Or even a wormhole,
Yeah.
That'd be pretty cool. I'm just saying. Give me a wormhole. Give me a good old wormhole.
Speaking of macabre archaeology, check this out. Everyone knows about the Black Plague. It was actually a very... The bubonic plague hit Europe and or Asia a number of times, but the worst by far was this period that was called the Black Death. And that was a period in the 1300s, and it was between 1346 and 1353. And the speculation has ranged from half to a quarter, so at least a quarter, to as much as half of the population was wiped out. Imagine that. Half the population wiped out in a period of 7 years. So there's a little bit of doubt that it was really that bad, that percentage truly were wiped out, because there's various things about plagues. They're kind of self-regulating in that the faster they act, the worse they are in terms of how they infect an individual, kind of the less bad they are for the larger population. In other words, if they strike very quickly and then the person dies, then,
it's done. Yeah,
it burns out quickly. All right. So
Gotcha.
Anyway, there has been new research, and it's just really kind of nuts and bolts archaeology. They just were digging into, and they were kind of counting up what amount to trash, basically, but they were counting up old pottery and shards and sherds and the various other archaeological words. And they found that after that period, there really were half as many artifacts found.
Really?
So, in other words, what they found in the ground, prior to, what they did, they excavated 2,000 1-meter square pits in 55 rural settlements that were occupied before and after the plague across eastern Britain. And then it's what it came down to. It in essence confirmed the fact that kind of a high percentage of the population was wiped out by the Black Plague.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Wow. That's
And
a
creepy.
lot of people to die from the
amazing.
plague. That is, and speaking of dying, though, this next one has got me extremely excited because John Carpenter, if this is where you're going, is coming back to do another Halloween. John Carpenter, not Rob Zombie, which I liked his movies, but the real John Carpenter. What do you think about that, man?
I think it's fantastic.
I do
he's
too.
Circling back, this will be the 11th in the franchise. I mean, most people who aren't absolute franchise fanatics think that you could easily take out at least half of them and not suffer terribly. The world would not be a worse place with maybe half.
Well, that is true. I have
the
seen
10 in the franchise.
Yeah.
So the fact that he is returning, he is the founder. He was involved with the first 2 was it or 3?
Yeah, I want to say the first 3, but the Season of the Witch, the third one, was really weird.
And it was completely different.
Yeah, it was about masks killing people and crap like that. I was not a fan of 3, to be honest with you. Season of the Witch, that's just me, though. But I was a fan of the first 2, for sure.
Yeah, the third one, it's okay as a standalone movie, but it doesn't really seem to make a whole lot of sense as far as fitting into
the lore.
The franchise.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. The overall tale. So anyway, yes, for the 11th film, he will be exec producing, so sort of supervising it. Blumhouse is involved, so we got some big names. And everyone seems to be very excited about that. If we actually go back one post, I wanted to mention, because I love this. I mean, who doesn't love the classic Universal monsters?
Oh, yeah. I hear...
Oh, God, yeah.
I hear
everyone I know.
Yeah, I know. I hear they're remaking a lot of those movies.
They are. I mean, they're coming back with a vengeance. They are basically starting all over again, and they're doing the Wolfman and
Monster of the Black Lagoon.
Yes, that was a great one.
Yes, there's a whole slate of over the next, say, 5 years or so that's already more or less lined up for rebooting these. And they're saying they will be kind of a combination of true horror and kind of the action adventure that we had in the 2 Mummy remakes from the early to mid 00s, which I loved. I loved those Mummy remakes.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah, I know that. They're great.
So anyway, relating to that, or in the spirit of that, our pals over at Bloody Disgusting, one of the classic horror sites, they have a real fun post where they list 15 little-known fun facts, trivia items about the Universal Monster movies. So go check that out. It is really
it is.
Did you know it took 8 hours a day to apply makeup on a number of the various monsters?
Could you imagine sitting there for 8
Frankenstein.
hours? Sitting there for 8 hours, I'd go mad. There's no way I could do that.
And the creature from the Black Lagoon, he could never sit down when he was in costume, and he could barely see out the eye slit. So here he is swimming around. He was a real swimmer. You know, they brought in a real Olympic-type swimmer to be the creature. And so he's really swimming. That's all real, of course. And he could barely see anything.
Crazy. You're going to hang around latex all day in the hot sun, but you won't be able to sit down.
Terrible.
Anyway,
lots of other cool facts from that. I'll toss one out here before we run out of time. Did you know, this is really interesting, from the original Mummy, the writer of the original Mummy film was actually present for the opening, the actual original opening of Tutankhamun's tomb.
That is cool. And did he die of the curse?
Apparently not.
Oh, good. Well, you know, he dodged the curse then. Because wasn't he the big curse guy, Tutankhamun?
Oh, yes.
You know,
yes.
everyone died, you know, from Tutankhamun, you know.
Carter, the archaeologists, they're all kinds of problems.
It wasn't
Speculation is...
Tut and then there's the other one that, I don't know if you consider him a mummy, but he's the Iceman. There's pretty big curse involved with them, too.
Yep, exactly. Yes, the Minnesota Iceman. You're talking about that thing going on. But yes, that was a curse as well, but I think it was a curse of bad luck more than anything else. Not real curse.
Ooh, I got one more real quick here. This is amazing. I don't want to put this over the air. I wouldn't want to be responsible. There's a new featurette for The Conjuring 2, which is the Enfield poltergeist case over in England.
Yep.
That the Warrens participated in, of course. There's a new featurette for the film, and it contains actual demonic voices from the Warrens files.
Boy, that's a dangerous precedent right there, man.
I listened to the recording. I mean, I did sit there and listen to it. It is spooky.
Did you do it in the middle of the night?
No, I didn't. But these are freaky.
Oh,
freaky
yeah. I don't know how I feel about that because, I mean, quite honestly, the more you give attention allegedly to these demons, the more powerful they are. Mm-hmm. I guess we're going to have to see if there's going to be any backlash to having that out there in the mass media. What happens? I mean, do we see uptick in demonic activity, or what's going to happen? Because, quite honestly, it's very, very powerful in the media. But speaking of powerful, that we're done. We're done with this powerful first hour, of course. But when we come back, we're going to have Richard Estep with us, and we're going to be talking about haunted hospitals. I mean, we're going to find out whether there's still doctors and nurses and everybody else still working these old hospitals that long since shuttered. And Kirsten, I'd like to thank you again for coming aboard, reading them email to us, and then participating during the headlines as well. So that was really, really cool to have that third person with us. But that being said, we got to go off to your Fox News. When we come back, haunted hospitals. Don't go anywhere.
Fox News Radio, I'm Kathleen Maloney. Now that he has the number of delegates needed to clinch the Republican presidential nomination, Donald Trump telling reporters what he'll do first if he wins the White House.
Well, I have many things to do. Number one, I'll be unwinding various executive orders, and I'll be unwinding executive orders in particular having to do with the border, where people are pouring into our country that aren't supposed to be here.
Trump, speaking in North Dakota, also says he'll debate Democrat Bernie Sanders if the event raises money for charity. Senator Sanders telling a rally in California that he's still very much in the presidential race.
And if I am the Democratic nominee, Donald Trump is toast.
Fox News Radio's Jessica Rosenthal is live in Ventura.
And so, Kathleen, Hillary Clinton has said she's focused on the general election now and defeating Donald Trump, and so is Bernie Sanders. He told his supporters at the rally here in Ventura that he heard Trump would like to debate him, and he's excited about that. And he said, we'll have to rent out the largest stadium in California for that. Many of his supporters here told me they will not vote for Clinton, even if she gets the nomination. Others said they would, and two men told me they'd vote for Sanders or Trump. The math does not favor Sanders. He'd need to win 68% of all remaining delegates left in order to lead on pledged delegates. And if you count superdelegates, Clinton's fewer than 80 away from the number needed. The latest reputable poll, though, in California has Sanders trailing Clinton by just 2 points ahead of the June 7th primary. Kathleen.
Thanks, Jessica. Hillary Clinton taking Donald Trump to task for comments that he profited on the housing crash when millions of families lost their homes.
So now we know what a good result is to Donald Trump. He gets his, and you get hurt.
Clinton at a labor union event in Las Vegas. Stocks closing mixed. The Dow sliding 23 points, S&P unchanged, and NASDAQ up 7. You're listening to Fox News Radio. Fair and balanced.
Ranger Station, Ranger speaking.
Yeah, hi. I'd like to report a bear sighting.
Location.
My backyard.
Oh, your backyard. Try telling a bear that.
I did, and this bear talked back.
Talking bear, that's rich.
No, wait, it was Smokey Bear.
Smokey? Why didn't you say so?
I did say so.
Continue.
I was burning yard waste.
No, boy.
He told me to burn legally and responsibly, and to remember that if it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave.
And as always, he's right. You know, 9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans. That means 9 out of 10 wildfires can be prevented.
Yeah, I know that now.
Thanks to me.
Actually, thanks to Smokey.
As usual, the talking bear gets all the credit. Get your Smokey on. Always burn responsibly and contact your local fire department for open burning regulations. Because 9 out of 10 wildfires can be prevented. Brought to you by Smokey Bear, the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council. Learn more at smokeybear.com.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
It's Thursday night, and you're grabbing drinks with some friends. Started off with a pitcher for the table, which quickly becomes 2. There's pool. And there's the photo booth.
All right, everybody squeeze in. Say cheese!
Followed naturally by an order of wings. And another.
Can we get some extra ranch sauce?
Then there's the ceremonial nightcap.
So what are we doing this weekend?
And lastly, it's back to the car, which, if you're buzzed, could be the most expensive night of your life. Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
And welcome back to After Hours AM. I'm your host, like every time I say that, Joel Sturgis, and right along with me is Eric
Olsen.
There you go. There's your cue, Eric. You got her? All right, here we go. Eric, who do we have on tap tonight?
Well, my goodness, in the world's most haunted hospitals, True Life Paranormal Encounters in Asylums, Hospitals, and Institutions, paramedic and paranormal investigator Richard Estep researches and delivers chilling stories of hospital hauntings from around the world, conducting first-hand investigations, interviews with investigators and those intimate with each locale, and recounting iconic TV show investigations. Estep unveils the history, ghosts, and legends behind 17 hospitals and asylums, old and new, some still operating. Amazing stuff. A little bit about Richard himself. Let us get to that. He is a very well-known paranormal investigator himself. He's a paramedic and volunteer firefighter. All that by day, by night, of course, paranormal investigator. Transplanted Brit living in Colorado. He has spent the last 2 decades investigating claims of ghosts and hauntings. He's director and co-founder of the Boulder County Paranormal Research Society. And we should add, it is very important, and I neglected to actually put it in the written article. I will add it in after the fact, maybe while we're speaking if I can, but certainly shortly thereafter. Richard is donating 10% of the profits of the book, of the World's Most Haunted Hospitals book, to St. Baldrick's Foundation, and that is a children's cancer foundation. Is that right, Richard?
That's right. They're at the forefront of trying to not only take care of kids with cancer, but find an end to this disease.
Wow.
So welcome to the program, Richard. We're very happy to have you on.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me
Richard.
along.
First, I want to say, hey, that's really good of you to do that. I mean, you don't need me saying, "Oh my God, you're great for doing that," but I mean that though. You don't hear that enough.
Well, thanks, man.
Things like that going on, and that really is very, very selfless of you to do that, and not a lot of people, like I said, do that. And so, again, props to you, my friend. Props to you. It's a horrible disease, and we hope that we find a cure someday in the future, in the very, very near future. But that being said, I got to ask you, you're Brit, transplanted, like Eric had said. Well, what made you want to get your own paranormal team together? Was it more than just interest? Did you have your own encounter with the paranormal first?
No, I've done this on both sides of the pond. It's always been my passion. And when I relocated to the States in 1999, following my IT career, I wanted to bring that with me. And so I joined a local team and philosophically had a few differences, wanted to kind of do it my own way, so decided to start one up, and we've been going strong for the best part of a decade.
Sure. I respect that. Sometimes you find a team and they you cut your teeth there, but then you realize that maybe I can do it a little bit different to my own satisfaction. And so a lot of folks, they find their way to doing that, starting their own team. Most people, that's how they start their own, is that exact reason. And I also, something that was gnawing at me while I was thinking about hospitals being haunted. And it kind of came to me in a thought, do you find that mental hospitals are more haunted than a regular hospital, or is there really no difference?
As I looked at a whole bunch of facilities, it really seems that the former asylums, especially the more historic ones, seem to be head and shoulders more haunted than your vanilla community hospital.
What do you think that's because the mental trauma first before they die, and then of course maybe confusion?
Well, I think if you look at the history of mental health care in this, well, not even in just the US, but Canada, the UK, Europe, if you look at the history of the profession, we have not been a kind profession in that regard for very long. We used to take people and shove them away in asylums, and primarily the goal was not to get them better, it was to get them out of sight, out of mind, you know?
Sure.
And when I looked at one of the Australian asylums, this was kind of interesting, but you're required to get 3 times as many signatures from officials to get out as you were to get committed.
Really?
So you had guys that wanted a quick and easy divorce, making some claims, hey, my wife is crazy, and she would end up behind bars for the rest of her life. It was terrifying and horrific.
Wow.
So you look at the amount of mistreatment, you look at procedures that were barbaric, like the ice pick lobotomies, where they'd hammer a spike through the eye socket into the brain in an attempt to cure illness. It's no wonder that these places were so full of negative emotions, and I think that can only come to the forefront when we investigate them years later.
Yeah, I would have to agree, just because the trauma that's involved in that, because I was actually talking to a good friend of mine. He's older, he's in his 70s, and he used to work at one of these state-run hospitals here in my home state of Minnesota, and it was funny because he said, back in the day, a sheriff's deputy could drop you off at one of these asylums, and you were stuck.
Mm-hmm.
He could just drop you up, and there you go. You're in.
Absolutely, and there weren't quite the checks and balances that you see in more modern medicine. So even today, mental health care is still kind of in its infancy as a branch of medicine.
Yeah,
and I have a ton of respect for the people that work in that field.
Oh, it's gotta be hard. I mean, because a lot of it with mental health, of course, is a lot of it's still theory. We're not quite sure yet. What makes the mind tick?
Yeah, even as we were back then, we're kind of groping around in the dark, doing the best we can on very limited research and evidence. And we've come quite a way, but we've got so far to go.
Now, did you ever go to, I don't know if you have it listed here in the book, of course, because I didn't see it listed, but Pennhurst. Now, someone had brought that up to me when I was getting ready for the show, of course, and one of the listeners brought that up as soon as they did the big announcement of haunted hospitals, haunted asylums. They brought up Pennhurst right away. Does that ring a bell with you at all? Have you gone to Pennhurst?
I've not, and wanted to put it in the book, but the problem with this book, in terms of what to put in, was really what to leave out.
Sure.
A title like The World's Most Haunted Anything really is very, very subjective, because how do you even define what's the most haunted?
Well, exactly.
Do you go on the number of years that the place has been open and active? Do you go on the sheer number of sightings, even if it's a new facility? And I ended up going for kind of a mix. I wanted to put in kind of a grab bag of some old historic buildings and then some newer ones, and some that are still open and some that are ruined and gone. So really, there could be 2, 3, 5 more books in a series like this, especially based on the fact that since I've written it and have been doing the media interviews, a lot of people have come forward with their own stories as patients. So Pennhurst, I would love to have written about, but just didn't have the chance.
I've heard it's quite notorious, of course, but then again, like you had said, it's very subjective. How do you, because I noticed that with the book, it wasn't like a top 10 list. It wasn't like, here's the most haunted to the least haunted. It really, was there any order here, or was it just, these are all really cool in their own merit, and there's really no top 10 list?
It's more the latter. I'm not a big fan of top 10 lists, although they make for a great topic of conversation in the pub over a pint or 3. If you were to get 1,000 paranormal investigators together and say, what are your top 10 haunted locations? That's a great debate. And it's so subjective. I mean, one good example is my wife and I and some good friends of ours, we spent a night at Waverly Hills. And we actually had a pretty quiet night there. We had 1 or 2 incidents. I have friends that investigated Waverly back in the mid-2000s, and that place crawled.
And I was there as well during the mid-2000s when it was really kind of big. I mean, well, it still is big, but when it was just kind of opening up to tours. You know what I mean? And it was very, very active. And in fact, the rumor I heard now with the building, it's become a hotel, which is a whole nother subject matter. But it was very active. And now you say, do you think it's because it's had so much media attention now and so many people have gone through it?
I don't know if that's the case. It could simply be that we were there on the wrong night. You know how it is.
Oh, sure.
It could be that we had the wrong mix of observers. We still don't know why people have such active nights in certain locations. Although I will tell you that my team doesn't provoke, and that might be a part of it.
Yeah.
We had activity, and it was an immense privilege to be there. I'd recommend anybody visit Waverly Hills and experience it for themselves. It's a very special atmosphere, as you know. It's a very special feeling. But I was pretty much girding myself for a crazy, frenetic, hectic night, and it didn't materialize.
No, I suppose it's a bit like fishing. I hate to use that analogy of fishing because we're still dealing with human beings, whether they're dead or alive. But it's kind of like fishing. Sometimes it's just nonstop. Then other nights it's as quiet as can be, and that's just
It's a lot like. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's just really nature of the beast.
It is. It's a lot like my fire department job. When I go pull a shift at the firehouse, you just don't know what you're going to get. I can work a weekend. I can do absolutely nothing, not turn a wheel all night, or we can just have pandemonium and run through the night until 7 o'clock the next morning, and it's just impossible to predict in advance.
Well, getting ready for the show, of course, I was looking at the list and researching these different places. One of these places, one of the hospitals, and it's escaping me, and I know you'll fill me in, is an active and functioning retirement home / Halloween.
And that's the subject of my next book, as it turns out. That case was so fascinating to me. It's Asylum 49, just outside Salt Lake City in Tooele, Utah. And so the story there is that you're right. It's really a triple threat, if you will. You've got an active retirement home. You have a functioning Halloween haunted house attraction, which gets over 30,000 people a year. And they're both built adjacent to the town cemetery.
Oh, boy. Wow.
So, you couldn't make this up.
No, it's like a perfect storm, if you will, of paranormal activity. I'm sure of it because from what I understood, reading the accounts of this place, the ghosts sometimes like to interact with the goers.
Very much so.
Very interesting.
And I'm sorry, guys. So I put boots on the ground there myself. A couple of my friends and I, when I was writing World's Most Haunted Hospitals, I talked to the owners and they said, "Oh yeah, you need to come out and spend a night." So we did, and we went out in the spring. We had a super quiet night. It was so relaxed and peaceful. And wandering around this place was fascinating, but we didn't get a lot of evidence. So I talked to the owners afterwards, and they said, we're sorry you're disappointed, but you came off season. You really need to get in here September, October, November, when we have thousands of people coming through.
Gotcha.
That's when our paranormal residents like to come out and be active. So I said, well, guys, it's 500 miles each way from my home in Colorado to Tooele. I'd need to come for more than a night. And they said, well, why don't you move in for a week?
Wow.
So that's exactly what I did. I put together a team of not only paranormal investigators, but I brought with me also nurses and paramedics, medical professionals. And we hauled a bunch of medical equipment out there to do some experimentation. We started on Halloween night of 2015.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. And what happened?
Well, we got so much stuff, it was crazy, and it really did fill its own book. Not to plug that too much, but it's out on August 22nd. It's called The Haunting of Asylum 49. But a good example is that the old emergency room, according to the various visitors, psychic mediums and so forth that have been through there, they say that the emergency room is haunted by the spirit of a former ER doctor who was very regimented. He's very my way or the highway.
Okay.
Doesn't suffer fools gladly, doesn't like being disagreed with, doesn't like incompetence. And so as someone who not only is a paramedic but trains them, I was able to call in a couple of favors and borrow one of the life-size mannequins we use. So it's a human mannequin with working lungs and an airway. It has veins. You can stick needles in and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, a true training, almost like a cadaver, but made of plastic, made of rubber.
Yeah, exactly. It's about as close to a fake human as you can get, and we use it to teach our new EMTs and medics how to do skills and procedures. So we borrowed him, loaded him into the flatbed of my truck, drove down there, and we ran a couple of cardiac arrest simulations in the old ER. And I talked to my team first, and I said, guys, here's what I think we should do. Based on what we've heard about this doctor, I'll play the role of the ER physician. You guys be my nurses and paramedics, okay? And what we'll do is we'll run it like the Keystone Cops. Okay. We'll run the most incompetent cardiac arrest that you can conceive of. And if we can get it wrong, we'll get it wrong. We'll do the wrong drug dosages. We'll trip over IVs and pull them out. We'll make it a catastrophe and see how this physician reacts. And the other thing that's important to note is that cardiac arrest, despite what Hollywood would have you to believe, are pretty calm affairs. We're very professional, you know. We don't yell and scream at each other. We pre-worked out in advance that we were going to get angry and we were going to get bitchy with one another and we were going to get annoyed and we were going to raise that kind of atmosphere in the room and see if that brought anything into play.
Wow. Now, is this documented in your upcoming book, though? I mean, I don't want to give too much away of this story. You know, I don't want to give too much away, so I still want people to buy the newest book coming out as well. Sure. But in a nutshell, did it create some activity?
Sure did, and we wired the whole ER with cameras and audio recording equipment. We wanted to capture this event. And what's fascinating is we worked the cardiac arrest. Everything went wrong by design. And we finished, I threw down my stethoscope, pronounced the patient dead, and I slammed my way out of the ER doors in full drama queen mode. And then everybody took a 5-minute break, you know. And I said, I left my radio down in the security center where the CCTV monitors are. I'll go grab it. And it's important to know, guys, that at Asylum 49, they wedge all of the doors open. Because, you know, it would be bad form to have a heavy door closing on a kid running through a haunted house. So they wedge them all open. And
Plus a fire problem.
Yeah. So they tend to stay open pretty much through the whole season. So I gave no thought to this, went down the main corridor, got my radio, came back, passed through a door that I must have been through a whole bunch of times already that week, and then jumped halfway out of my skin. The door is slammed violently on me right behind me. It missed hitting me in the face by a fraction of a second.
Oh, my Lord.
And it was, if you've ever been so mad with someone in an argument that you slammed a door on your way out of a room to make a statement, that's exactly what happened to me.
Wow. What?
And
wow.
And one of the nurses came to me and she said, "You know, Richard, I hate to say it, but you made someone really angry here."
See, you did in the end. Of course, I don't mean to cut Eric off there for a second, but you did get a reaction that you're aiming for, and I would imagine you felt very successful in that.
You know, I actually was, and I have the audio, which I'm going to put on my website. My boss, Jen, who was with me, she was my chief at the time, said, "You know, I've seen you in life or death situations, literally. You have never looked this scared, man. You have never looked this scared." And I said, "You know, it feels like it's targeted at me personally because I've done this for 20 years and I'm always like a dispassionate observer. I investigate, I help people out, that's my job. But now this is targeted at me. I can feel that someone here is really, really mad at me." So I don't know if you've ever apologized to thin air. It's a very humbling experience, but that's what I did.
I have done that a time or two.
Talking to yourself in the dark, the paranormal investigator experience.
At times can be.
That's an amazing story, and boy, I'm looking forward to that book because what a unique experience. I mean, to have. I'm looking forward to the detail and to having something that took place just over the course of a week be given the full reign of an entire book. Hey, I really wanted to back up a little bit because I really loved actually your intro to the book, to the World's Most Haunted Hospitals book, where you were basically explaining both kind of in general and then from your personal perspective why you think hospitals are so particularly haunted. I mean, of course, it's all quite logical, but the way you put it, as I say, both in general and specific to your experience, I thought was really, really interesting, and we need that kind of grounding to then take off again from.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think that when you look at why a location's haunted, well, broadly speaking, you have three types, don't you? You have the haunted person, the haunted place, and the haunted location. And, of course, we're plainly dealing with locations here. But it's been my experience in my career that generally two types of places are haunted. It's the ones where you've had either strong positive emotion and strong negative emotion. Those are the two. And it's the emotion that's the key. So a good example is I just did an investigation for the Denver Fire Department Museum, which is one of their original firehouses. Very, very active location. No death there at all. Nothing, tragic in its history. But the firefighters that lived in that firehouse loved the place very much. And I think that's a key kind of component as to why some of them linger on after their death. Now, with a hospital, you've got the whole spectrum of human drama on one stage. You have the emergency room where lives are ending, sometimes violently and usually unexpectedly. You have the longer-term wards where people are dying of natural causes. And then you have the labor and delivery department where you have the joy of new life entering the world and new families are being born. And you have this all within a fairly small, localized area. So you have this just torrent of information going year after year after year after year. And then I think you throw in the healers, people that are drawn to the medical profession. It really is a calling, not a job for the most part. And a lot of the stories that I was able to collect for the book are cases of medical providers like doctors and nurses who are still on duty after their death. Sure. And I think that speaks a lot to their mentality of service.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in quick, while you're in a haunted hospital, do you find the maternity ward to be haunted, or do you find the emergency room to be the most haunted? Or does it really not have a preference? It's everywhere.
It seems to be throughout, and certainly the labor and delivery wards that I spent the night in, and I did that at Asylum 49, the reports of that location, not just shadow figures, but the sounds of babies crying, and also the more residual sounds of the labor and delivery suite being in operation. So you would hear heart monitors and things like that. And yet one of the resident spirits is that tragic story of a young woman who died in childbirth and has not quite, it seems, come to terms with what happened to her and her baby yet. So labor and delivery is definitely a very haunted location in some hospitals.
I would imagine, because, wow, my wife and we just had a baby 3 months ago, and I remember very vividly again what it's like and how fast they move and how fast it can turn bad as well, because we also, unfortunately, we heard that happening while we were in that maternity ward, where it was tougher for one of the young ladies. And so, of course, it can be scary and it can be happy all at the same time.
Absolutely.
As we're heading into the bottom of the hour break, I was real interested also, because it's a little vague, Richard. I was wondering, have you had any actual paranormal experiences on the job, since your job is so related to hospitals? You know, have you in fact had that experience? And if you have, did that lead you in the direction of thinking about doing the book?
You know, I haven't, and I wish that I could tell you I did. Usually when I'm working, though, I'm very, very focused on the matter at hand, the patient, and whatever their emergency is. But also it's worth mentioning that most hospital administrators don't like ghost stories getting out, at least not while the hospital's open. And I can't name the facility, but one that I used to regularly transport patients to since closed down and moved to a newer location in town. And I was talking to one of the nurses as part of the research for the book, and she said in a totally matter-of-fact, casual way, she said, oh, yeah, when we used to work night shifts up on 3 North, that was the ward name, the doors would always open at night, always would open, and we would have one of the charge nurses be stern and say, hey, knock this stuff off, we're trying to get stuff done, and you're creeping us out, and it would stop.
Wow.
So once you get medical professionals together and kind of get them talking about their stories, it's amazing how many of them have ghost stories to share.
Yeah.
And I think it's true with all professionals. One of my side jobs is I give ghost story tours at the Stanley Hotel up in Estes Park, a very haunted.
Sure, we're familiar with the Stanley.
Yeah, so I was doing a tour just last week, and I was waiting at the end while my group was in the tunnels, and I was chatting to this gentleman. And he said, oh, yeah, I'm definitely a believer. I've had a lot of experiences at work. And I said, well, what do you do, man? And he said, I'm a mortician.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, I've got to ask you this. I said, when you guys get together for conferences and stuff like that, do you all share ghost stories? Are there a lot of mortuary ghost stories? And he looked me in the eye and just said, you have no idea.
Oh, I can just imagine. I can just imagine. I have talked to people in that line of work, and boy, oh boy, you're correct. The stories that they could tell would make your hair curl. And they're so stone-faced about it, too. Like, nothing shakes these people.
Right, totally unflappable. I mean, you can't really be that imaginative if you're working around dead bodies. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but what I mean is that you can't be jumping at every shadow if you're working around bodies of the dead all the time. You have to develop a certain amount of decorum, don't you?
Yeah, you do.
He was telling me very plainly that in their mortuary, He knows he's alone in the building. He's working on a body at night sometimes, and they'll hear footsteps in there. They'll hear doors opening and closing and those kind of things.
That would unnerve most anybody, and me included. You know, I've been doing this a while, like you, about 20 plus years, and that would still unnerve me. I don't care who you are, you get unnerved.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
I would absolutely.
I'd run away peeing, to be honest with you. But and that note, we got to run a break. We come back. More Richard Estep. When we come back, don't go anywhere because more haunted hospitals. I think you're going to be interested in what we talk about next with the haunted hospital, so don't go anywhere.
Green light. Hey girl, school zone. I'm getting hungry. Car changing lanes. You want to meet me for pizza? Stop sign. Intersection clear. Yeah, street. Pizza sounds good. Ballin Street? Girlin Street!
It's hard to concentrate on two things at once, like texting and driving. Stop the text, stop the wrecks. How will you stop texting and driving? Tell us at stoptextstoprex.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
After the show, make sure you stop in and join the After Hours AM, America's Most Haunted Facebook group. It is the fastest growing radio group on Facebook.
Hi, I'm Kip Parker. And I'm Charlie Parker. And we're the Parker Brothers. Hey, Charlie, what's missing from our game catalog? I don't know, Kip. Tell me. Well, you can't talk to the dead. You sure as hell can. That's why we got this brand new game called Ouija. Ouija? Well, break that down for me. Well, it's Wii because you're having a great time. And G, it's because G, aren't you having a blast because you're having a good time with the Wii. It looks like it smelled like a Chinaman got caught in there. Don't question it. Well, Ouija, Kip, tell me about it. Well, inside the package comes a flat board with all the letters of the alphabet, numbers from 0 to 9, and a yes-no written out by itself. Well, that sounds like a lot of stuff going on. It's got a lot of stuff going on indeed, Charlie. It also comes with this planchette, which hovers over the letters the dead are trying to tell you. Well, how does that work, Chip? Well, you ask the question, and then the dead move your hands in the direction of the answers. That sounds like a heck of a way to find Grandpa's slave money. Turns out it was in the attic. But the questions don't have to be as serious as slavery. You can also find out if Sally's got a crush on you. The dead like to answer all sorts of trivial questions. Feels like they'd have better things to do with their time, Kip. No, lost souls are lost forever, and they're really glad to help. Well, gee, Kip, can't you just get any sort of board with numbers and letters and talk to the dead? The dead prefer quality like anybody else. Quality you can only find at Parker & Parker.
The Ouija board, brought to you by the Parker Brothers, available in both white and colored wallworks. Separate but equal savings.
Hey everybody, this is Joel Sturgis, and did you know that After Hours AM and America's Most Haunted have a great new website out there? You're going to want to visit America's-Most-Haunted.com. There you can get all the new content from all the writers for America's Most Haunted, as well as the great haunted headlines everybody loves each and every week, as well as catch After Hours AM live right there, along with podcasts, past shows, and get to know your hosts, as well as contact us all in one stop. You're going to love it. You're not going to want to go anywhere else. So come to America's-Most-Haunted.com today. Do you have a question for our guest tonight? Don't feel like calling the show? Not a problem. Email those questions to afterhoursam@gmail.com. Again, that's afterhoursam@gmail.com.
And welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me is Mr. Eric Olsen, and we're talking Haunted Asylums of Richard Estep tonight, and it's just getting started, everybody. Quite honestly, we're talking why we think hospitals are haunted and why Richard really thinks they're haunted because of all the tragedy and all the good things, bad things, and everything in between that happens at a hospital. Richard, I got to ask, do you think that it's definitely an energy thing, or do you think it's conscious hauntings?
Well, I think that. Do you mean residual versus intelligence?
Yeah, exactly. Do you think it's energy just playing itself back? like a residual, or do you think that the majority of these are actually intelligent haunts?
Well, I found a degree of both in my research. Either the stuff I investigated personally and the stuff that I talked to other investigators about. So we have a lot of residual stuff. I mean, one thing that seems to be very common is auditory phenomena, the sound of hospital carts and wheelchairs squeaking on the floors, sometimes on tile floors that are no longer there. Those kind of things, all of the everyday business of running a hospital. Excuse me, and I heard that at the facilities around the world, fairly common. But you also had those intelligent haunts where they were interactive, and they would speak with investigators through spirit boxes and leave them EVPs and those kind of things. So I think it was very much a mix.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. I mean, I think you're right. It would be a mix. Eric, you were like, for instance, doing America's Most Haunted, the book. You covered a couple insane asylums, hospitals. Would you agree with that estimation? Did you kind of run into that same thing?
Oh yeah, yes, absolutely. The asylums, whether they be the lunatic asylum variety or the or sanatoriums is what I was trying to come up with. Those are places where there is a lot of negativity. There was negativity within the people themselves, the patients themselves. Many were, of course, obviously that's why they were there. Obviously, there's a lot of despair at a sanatorium. The White Plague, as it was called, was really a terrible thing, and it's thank goodness it's. Well, we thought it was cured. I guess we've been seeing a bit of it here and there coming back, but nonetheless, yeah. So I think the combination of as Richard was saying, the volume of people coming through, the fact that a lot of the people, in a hospital, typically you're not, hopefully, there all that long. Either you're in the emergency area and you're not going to be there long at all. If you're longer term, hopefully that's a matter of weeks, one would imagine. But at some of the, certainly the insane asylums, as they were called at the time, you had people who were in literally for life. You had people who never or barely ever were outside. And so you have such a deep concentration, plus the negativity kind of inherent in that situation, not exclusively, certainly, but there's a lot of negativity. There was violence, certainly Waverly Hills or Trans-Allegheny. You hear a lot about violence that occurred within the walls. And so, yes, absolutely. And those are the two we did. We covered 10 locations in America's Most Haunted. In theory, the 10 most haunted in the U.S. And like you, we tried to kind of mix it up. We did a combination of the real well-known, kind of obvious, I suppose, super haunts, along with some lesser-known, little more eccentric places. And while one of the criteria was they do have to be public or at least semi-public, because otherwise, what's the point of talking about them? People can't go there. We had some that are much more difficult, at least, to get in. They're not literally just open to the public, and we tried to break it up geographically as well. So. Yes, would be the short answer to the original question. But, yeah, we really did find that these institutions, I would broaden it out even a little bit to just institutions in general, really, really do seem to have an awful lot of activity. And again, as Richard said, it's kind of a combination of the patients / inmates, for example, if we're talking about a prison like the Ohio State Reformatory, and then on the other hand, staff, and it seemed especially on the medical side. Hey, given that, as always, time's going really fast, I'd love to hear a few of your favorite stories. Maybe why don't we start with the U.S.? Give us just a couple of your really favorite tales from the U.S. hospitals that you do cover in the book.
Well, I've already talked a little bit about Asylum 49, and that's, I think, my absolute favorite, hands down, purely because of familiarity. And the fact that I lived there for a week. And I interviewed pretty much the security staff. I interviewed the volunteers. I interviewed the owners, and even one or two customers, a whole bunch of people that worked there. And just the sheer volume of stories I got there was absolutely staggering, So I think that's got to be my favorite hospital. And perhaps my favorite is the spirit that walks those corridors that died in a fire. And he appeared in a photograph. And when you look at the photograph, he looks as though he's wearing a clown mask, or he's painted up as a clown.
Interesting.
And so one of the owners of the place, Kim Anderson, nicknamed him the Clown and used to refer to him jokingly as the crazy clown posse. No one put two and two together as to why, though, whenever he was active in that area, they would smell smoke.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it turns out it was only with the help of a visiting psychic medium that when they communicated with the spirit, he'd taken a real dislike to Kim, the owner of that place, because what Kim thought was clown makeup or a clown mask was in fact a burn mask.
Oh.
And that he had been very badly burned in a fire, so it was one of those old-fashioned over-the-face burn masks.
Okay.
So once they figured that out, Kim was a great deal more respectful in the way that he dealt with this particular spirit. But to this day, the folks that work there know that he's around when they smell the wisps of the smoke that's starting to get into their noses.
Well, do any of the nurses that currently work on the retirement home side, do they encounter any ghosts on that side, or do they pretty much leave them alone?
You know, they try not to talk about it too much because it's quite frankly not the best thing for business. But if you saw the episode of Ghost Adventures where Zach and the boys investigated Tuella, they went in and talked to a bunch of the nurses and got a tour of that side of things. And they'd had quite a few hair-raising stories themselves to tell.
Yeah, I did see that episode, and it was a really good episode, but even better location. I found it very, very fascinating. We got a great email here. This is from Tiffany. Tiffany says, I currently work in a hospital, of course. She says, of course, like everybody else in our profession, that's where we shoot to be, is at the hospital, because that's, after all, we're the best of the best want to be. That being said, I happen to work in the treatment wing. Has Richard found that drug addiction treatment wings, is it a different kind of haunting from your average haunting in a hospital? Is there more dread? Is there any other differences between a drug-addicted spirit and a standard spirit?
Oh, that's a great question, and I can't say that I've ever encountered a spirit that relates to addiction in that regard. I'm not saying it doesn't happen or it's not possible. I'm just saying that it hasn't been part of my experience.
Okay.
There was a cautionary tale that relates to one of the older London hospitals, though, which fascinated me, and it involved a nurse who, breaking one of the rules of the medical profession, actually ended up caring for her own fiancé. He was her patient after an injury, and she accidentally overdosed him on morphine when trying to take care of his pain. And of course, when you overdose on morphine, the body, the signals which tell your lungs to breathe that go from your brain through your spinal cord get blocked, and you end up going into respiratory arrest and dying. And that's what happened to her fiance. And she's such a sad and tragic character. The nurses in this very old historic London hospital report seeing her whenever they're going to give pain medications.
Almost like a harbinger, remember, be careful.
Yeah, it's almost exactly a case of double check your doses. You know the old carpentry expression of measure twice at once?
Yep.
It's the same with drugs. Once you've given it, you can't take it back. Although back in the day, they didn't have the drug we have now, Narcan, which will somewhat reverse the effects of an opiate overdose. But whenever, those kind of pain meds are being given, she appears, and she's just there, she's just lurking around as if to say to the current generation of nurses, make sure you don't overdose that. You can always give more, but you can't take it back.
Exactly. And I've heard similar tales, like it's almost like a road sign, be careful, caution, be careful what you're doing because you don't want to end up be like me and go too far. And I got a quick question. You did the Clark Air Force Base. Do you find that hospital, do you find a military installation to be any different of a haunt, or is it the same?
Well, this was a unique installation. If you look at Clark and its history, that whole field, that area played a significant role in the Second World War, of course. But the hospital itself was built post-World War II. Clark was one of the biggest U.S. bases in that region, and it was a state-of-the-art medical facility at the time. But the thing is that when the Vietnam conflict broke out, the first stop for many of the wounded and traumatized servicemen coming back stateside was to Clark. So they would come out of theater and they would go to Clark. Okay. And every day you would have this parade of wounded GIs coming in. And of course, not just the physical trauma that had gotten them shipped out, but the emotional battlefield trauma that went with it.
Well, sure, the PTSD that's involved. I mean, they're just trying to make sense of what happened to themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we're back to that strong and intense emotion.
Yeah, well, exactly. And, and that's the thing. Now, have you ever seen one of these asylums that look like someone just shuttered up, just locked it one night and decided not to open back up? And if so, having everything still intact, does it create a stronger atmosphere?
Well, again, to come back to the same one, that's Asylum 49. When they closed the doors of that place, they actually did just leave. The X-ray equipment is still there. The same beds that the patients lived and died on are still there. All of the lights in the ceiling, the ones on the armatures, are still there, and a lot of the equipment still works. There were even patient X-rays up on the X-ray reading boards. Go ahead.
Why did they leave? I mean, was there ever explanation why they left it that way?
Yeah, it was the facility was supplanted by a newer one, and as kind of time went on, what happened was people were drawn away to this newer facility, which kind of paid better. So the old Tuella Hospital fell into a state of decline. Okay. More and more folks started to trickle out. The folks that were left got overworked. You know how it is.
Yeah.
And so ultimately they just said, we're done. And they closed the doors, and it was more cost effective to just dump everything rather than try and resell it on. So you walk through those halls today, and the same beds and the same fixtures and fittings, the same chairs, even some of the same glasses that people drank out of are all still in there.
Oh, exactly. We got another great email. This is from Ben, and Ben says, I am currently a practicing physician in Dallas, Texas. And I have to say, Richard's absolutely correct. We do not, in the public eye, talk about weird goings-on in the hospital. Not to say there is not weird goings-on. I myself, right after medical school, was a brash young doctor, and I was, to be completely honest with everyone listening, an atheist. I did not find my faith until I started working as a trauma doctor in an ER, where I saw some of the strangest and most wonderful things all at the same time with these cardiac arrest patients, head trauma patients. It was almost as if, and I'm sure Richard can attest to this being a paramedic, almost as if a calm takes place just before they pass, and you feel as if there's more than just you in the room. Now, have you ever felt that, Richard, where it's just like, oh my gosh, there's something bigger than me going on?
More than once. And firstly, I want to say thanks to Ben for your service. I always appreciate doctors. Secondly, I hope you're nice to your paramedics. I'm sure you are. Thirdly, check out, and this is in the book, Yorktown Memorial Hospital in Texas. Okay. That hospital is one of the resident ghosts there is one of the former doctors who now haunts the place, and he's been seen walking in and around what was the old physician's lounge. So lots of ghostly doctors in this book. But I kind of agree with Ben, and not to... I respect everybody's beliefs. I tend to be an agnostic, but I definitely believe in an afterlife and a greater power. I think that 20 years investigating these kind of claims will do that. Whenever I pronounce a patient dead, I know some medics that will, do a small private prayer or whatever. Sure. I just tend to usually wait until I'm on my own, and I'll just say a couple of words. I'll say, listen, I don't know if you're here or if you can hear me, but we did the best we could for you. Really sorry we couldn't save you, but it's now time for you to move on and see what comes next and enjoy the next great step in your adventure.
Do you feel that release that he was talking about as if it's like a peaceful release that's over, that your struggle's done?
A body at rest is kind of very tranquil for the most part, assuming it hasn't been greatly traumatized. I think it's very easy, though, to find oneself predisposed after you do this a lot. And I wouldn't say that I felt an energy in the room or anything like that, but my own hackles definitely do go up.
Sure. I mean, I appreciate the work you do. I mean, if it weren't for paramedics, a lot of us wouldn't be here because they are truly the first line of care. I mean, when the ambulance gets there, that's your first lifeline.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've been seeing an awful lot of that as we've mentioned. I mean, my father's been attended to by paramedics probably, 4 times in the last few months. I mean, it's unfortunately a very common thing. But They are without the slightest lapse, unfailingly polite, because we've had a couple times where he, because of the state of mind and because he was in so much pain and he was, he's having a cardiac episode. I mean, he was scared. He had all kinds of issues, and they are so kind and gentle yet professional. I couldn't agree more. I have seen it firsthand, again, too many times, unfortunately. Lately, what an amazing job that they do. And it really is. It's a calling. It is not a job because, sometimes you got to put up with people who are very unhappy and very upset and don't want to be in that situation and are going to lash out. And you, the paramedic, are the people who they may be lashing out at. And yet it's your job to attend to them and give them the best possible chance. So I really, really do appreciate that. I did want to ask you, Richard, you talked about it a little bit just now. I usually end up asking this, certainly people who have a really good, large perspective and whose opinion I respect. What is your sort of overall perspective on the paranormal? What is it from your perspective? And does that intersect with a religious perspective and or even a scientific perspective?
Well, it's just my opinion, because I know that people have a wide variety of faith-based opinions and scientific opinions and so forth. I think we're looking at an umbrella term. Genuinely, there is no such thing as the paranormal. There is no such thing as the supernatural. We just don't have an adequate understanding of what constitutes normal yet. Mm-hmm. So it's a term that we're using, and we're kind of like the old cave dwellers who used to look up at the moon and try and put a label on it and looked at the stars and thought that they were curtains, pinholes in this big black curtain, I think that we have phenomena that take place. It's a natural aspect of existence. We don't yet understand it because our physics as a science, although it's come a long way, is still in its infancy.
Yeah.
And I think that one day, whether it's 100 or 1,000 years from now, the kind of stuff that I'm writing books about that is almost magical and supernatural in appearance is in fact going to be humdrum every day. Future generations are going to laugh at us and say, they used to believe in the most incredible things. In reality, we didn't know how it worked.
You're right, because I notice now that medical science is inching ever closer to accepting the fact of an afterlife, just for their own experiments.
But the more, what's interesting is the more we learn about it, the more we realize we're ignorant. Mm-hmm. And a great case in point is what I'm very well studied on, the science of resuscitation. It fascinates me. And the point at which a human being truly dies is becoming more and more of a gray area. We have patients, for example, that have been immersed in cold water drownings for an hour to an hour and a half.
Wow.
And that they have been successfully resuscitated. We have patients who have been down in the snow without CPR, without any blood flow to their brain or very minimal blood flow, and they'll be resuscitated and then come back with the most incredible narratives.
I was just about to ask you, has anyone ever confided in you and said, Richard, I saw the craziest thing. No one's ever going to believe me, but yeah, and they tell you, and does it seem to be a one story fits all, or do you hear just a whole gamut of what people experience in the afterlife?
Well, almost overwhelmingly, the experiences are positive, not negative. And when you look at people that are having near-death experiences, they tend to come back calmer, more peaceful, and they tend to look at the world differently. Mm-hmm. So they tend to be less worried. They tend to be less materialistic. They tend to care less about their mortgage and their job and I'm not where I want to be in life. Yeah. And they seem to be a whole lot more zen.
Okay. Well, you know what? That makes total sense because they saw a glimpse of what's waiting and they kind of came back here going, none of this crap really matters at the end because I'm not going to take it with me anyway. So, that whole I've seen that time and time again. I studied, like you, NDEs, near-death experiences, quite extensively with Dr. Goldberg. And the stories I heard firsthand from these people were just phenomenal. I mean, but like you said, I had yet to hear I went to hell and Satan fed upon my bones. I didn't hear any of that, although you do hear people say that kind of stuff. But I never heard, like you said, a negative experience from someone that had a near-death experience. It's very true.
They are still out there. The literature does report a number of negative NDEs, but proportionally, they're in the great minority.
Yeah.
And the other type of care provider I'm fascinated with talking to is the palliative care people, those that work with the imminently dying. which if there is anything so close as to angels on earth, it's those people, you know, the people that man the hospices and do that kind of work. And I talked to the nursing staff 10 years ago that took care of my mom when she was in hospice. And time again, you hear the same story. Very lucid conversations, patients that were mentally out of it, for want of a better term, very mentally foggy, not making a lot of sense. Suddenly, right before they pass, it's as though a light comes on. They become lucid, and they have this very clear conversation with someone that nobody else can see.
Yeah, my dad, I lost him 2 years ago, and he was in hospice, and in his dying hours, he was having conversations with his mother, my grandmother, that passed some 20 years or 10 years before he went. And it was like, wow, it was so matter-of-fact, the conversation, you know. I don't think it was hallucination. I really don't. I believe he was being visited by our relatives I couldn't see.
Well, and to speak to that, because that always was my suspicion too, the brain does some interesting things when it's shutting down. And I always thought, hey, maybe this is some kind of biological, what's the term I'm looking for? Not survival mechanism, but a mechanism that eases us into death and dying, makes it less traumatic, you know?
Yeah.
But it ignores the fact that when the brain actually starts to shut down, it works less efficiently, not more. You're not going to come up with these clear, linear narratives that make sense if you have a truly diseased brain. And there are instances of patients with dementia, very, very severe dementia, that were completely confused up to the time of their passing, had no idea where they were, what was going on, suddenly having this moment of clarity right before they passed, as though some kind of veil was lifted.
And I've heard that as well, and it's just amazing, you know. And a doctor one time, of course, didn't believe in the paranormal, and he says, well, you know, basically when you die, he says, just to put it in terms you understand, it's like the brain releases a massive dose of LSD, you know, to kind of put you in a more relaxed state.
Well, I've seen LSD. I worked EMS at Burning Man for 10 years, and I've seen
I was going to say.
And the stories that you get from those patients are not, I went to a nice place and I spoke to this person. That's not what you get. You get these completely chaotic, crazy hallucinations, and that's not what we get from the dead and dying. What it is, though, is kind of a knee-jerk response from someone that hasn't studied the phenomenon.
Sure.
And I think here's my suspicion. We've always, generally in the medical profession, we've thought of the fact that mind is a product of brain. In other words, mind arises from brain, and when brain dies, mind is done. I think now we're starting to look at the possibility that brain is a receiver for mind. So if I'm watching a TV show tonight and I turn it off halfway through, that story's still being played out, but I turned off my receiver, the TV, right? But those events are still taking place in the airwaves, if you will, on the broadcast. You know what I mean?
It's like someone flipping off a radio show right now, but we're still talking away. Exactly.
Absolutely. And I think now it makes a lot more sense that the receiver is still up, maybe turned off and maybe turned on, for example, during the near-death experience or when the patient is in the coma, and yet the consciousness is still out there independently of the receiver.
I totally get where you're coming from. I believe that as well. I really think that's how it works as well. But hey, we only got about 2 minutes left, so we go ahead, plug away, tell people you can get your book, your websites, your emails, all that kind of good stuff.
Well, first thing I'd like to say is thanks for having me on, and I'd like to encourage your readers to support the St. Baldrick's Foundation. A lot of Americans every year shave themselves bald in solidarity with the kids who are undergoing chemo, and it's a charity that could really use donations. And I'll donate, like I said, 10% of my royalties from haunted hospitals to St. Baldrick's. Come visit me online at Richard Estep, ESTEP.net. I'd love to hear your stories. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to hear what you think of my books, or just say hi. So shoot me an email through there.
Very, very good, man. Very, very. Again, I can't give you enough respect for donating 10% like that. That's to a very, very worthy cause. Again, everyone pick up all of Richard's books. They're worth your time, worth the read. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you tonight, Richard. And on behalf of myself, Mr. Eric Olsen over there, we'd like to thank you for listening to this shit of After Hours AM. And, take care of each other, love each other. Remember, life is really, really short, so enjoy it every day and don't take it for granted ever. So that being said, Love you
Thank
all.
you for listening to this edition of After Hours AM, and please remember to like us on Facebook and also follow us over on Twitter.